Hello, I'm Tim with the Iowa Register, and I'm here with Dr. Amber Wheeler, the Superintendent of USD 258 schools. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Well, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I was thinking before you came, how long have you been superintendent now?
So this is my 5th year in Humboldt.
Fifth year?
Yeah.
Boy, that's crazy.
It does. It flies.
I'm still thinking like you're the new
Right.
superintendent, but you are not.
I
5 years
still
is
feel
enough.
that way.
Does it?
Yeah.
Before you were before you arrived here at Humboldt, where were you? What were you doing?
Yeah. So I spent 13 years as an elementary school principal. I tell people I lived
Wow.
in Little Land and I liked it there. But that's what I did for 13 years. I spent 8 of those just before I came here in Columbus. I was an elementary principal there. I taught at the elementary level, so spent some time as a math coach,
Mhm.
some of that kind of work. So.
What do you enjoy most? Sometimes I think about when you're in administration, it's taking you farther away from the kids, which is the center of the work and often a lot of times the most fun.
Mhm.
So what do you enjoy about being on the administrative side and being
Yeah.
superintendent?
So I've always loved kids. I do love getting to see things from a district standpoint so that, I did live in Little Land for a long time, but
Mhm.
I love getting to see the entirety of that program, actually
Mhm.
getting to work with middle school and getting to work with high school and watching the things that we do in elementary school pay off in middle school and high
Sure.
school. But early on in my career, I really enjoyed working with other adults to help them be successful with kids. And I think that's probably what I enjoy most about whether I was a principal or a superintendent is working with adults to help them be successful as
Mhm.
well
Mhm.
in the classroom and watching the successes they have with kids has always brought me great joy. So that is
Huh.
what I really love about this job.
That's a really interesting part. I don't really think of superintendents as teachers, as coaching, but you really are the captain of the ship, right?
Well,
And
and I get to spend a lot of time working with principals who then in turn work with their
right.
teachers, and so like that's a passion of mine is building other leaders. So I really enjoy that piece of it.
Hmm. Well, that's really, really cool. Well, thank you very much for being here.
Mhm.
I wanted to ask you a couple questions. The first is related to the Humboldt Promise. So, Helen was on here a couple weeks ago and just really explained the Humboldt Promise program and how revolutionary it will be for
Absolutely.
students. And I guess the first question I wanted to ask you was, how have you seen that manifest itself now that you're a semester and change in? Has there been kind of a morale change, or are you kind of feeling that excitement and kind of where are you seeing that take place?
I think one of the things, and I don't know if we've seen it yet, but I think it's coming, is maybe even a change in where our kids believe that they can go.
Mhm.
We talk about dreaming our boldest dreams. We talked about that when the Promise Scholarship
Right.
came out. That was the goal, was for kids to be able to dream their biggest dreams and feel
Mhm.
like they can get there. That money is not going to be the obstacle. And I think it also puts a lot of pressure on us to make sure that not only the money's there now, so we have to make sure that the preparation is also there so that they can go get those dreams. And so that's an exciting thing for us, but also it means, hey, like, we've got to make sure kids are ready.
Yeah.
And so like when we talk about I think we've seen that some of our youngest learners, so that's where we saw the greatest increase in students,
Hmm.
was those people who were deciding where their kids were going to go to school, and they are trying to decide what community their kids are going to go to school in. And that's where we saw the largest increase in students, was at our lowest levels, at
Kind
sixth
of the
grade in
first, second.
particular.
Oh,
But
really?
well, that's the start of middle school, so
Uh
it's a new
huh.
building
Uh huh.
anyway, and so we saw it there, but we also saw it in preschool and kindergarten.
Sure.
And so our preschool and kindergarten numbers were large last year, and we had to add a third kindergarten classroom. Our preschool classrooms were both full. And so we're seeing some of that as parents are starting to decide where they want to choose starting their kids, where they're going to have access to that Humboldt Promise. So,
That's an interesting point about the teachers and how all of a sudden everything seems to matter more. You're right in a way that, oh, well, as a teacher thinking his or her worst thoughts. These kids aren't going to college anyways. They're never going to use this stuff. I can kind of just traipse my way through this lesson plan. No, you can't now,
Well, and
right?
I don't think we ever could before. Like I've
Mhm.
always felt like we have great teachers who were always giving the best effort. I think as we start looking at how our curriculum is aligned and we start
Mhm.
looking at what courses we offer, that just becomes all more important. And it
Right.
isn't that we are only looking at, this Promise Scholarship also covers technical schools.
Hmm.
So we have some kids for whom that is the absolute best pathway. So how do we make sure they have the skills to go into those
Right.
technical areas and be really successful? And then how do we make sure those kids that want to go into maybe a more of a 4-year degree type of a program? I think one of the really exciting things is our kids aren't thinking it necessarily just about a 4-year program now, especially those kids who have scholarships early on and maybe are deferring some of that promised scholarship. Now, all of a sudden, they're talking master's degree
Yeah.
programs and doctorate degree programs. I just feel like maybe where we would have seen that bachelor's degree as being the top, well, now.
It's a
Now it's
starting point.
open. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now it's the starting point for where we're going to go next. And um, I feel a real pressure and a real importance to make sure that our kids have the things in high school that they need to move forward, whatever that looks like for that particular child.
Yeah.
And it looks different for every kid. But I think Humboldt has always been really good about looking at each kid individually and saying CTE has been important for
Hmm.
us. We've grown that in the last
Right.
5, 6, 7 years to be a really strong program and to have a lot of different variety of options for kids. And so we've always had that every kid is important. And now that just is even more important, I guess.
Mm.
It becomes even more of a push to make sure we have everything in place that those kids need to
Yeah.
take that next step, whatever that looks like.
How is it affecting teacher recruitment? I had Stacy Fager here from Iola Public Schools a couple weeks ago, and he really mentioned just where there used to be 200 candidates for open positions, that has drastically shrunk. There's just fewer people going into education, and so districts have more work to do to recruit them, especially to rural areas. I imagine something like the Humboldt Promise is a big arrow in your quiver when you're looking to recruit teachers.
Absolutely. I think recruitment is a multi-layered process, but that is certainly a piece of the puzzle of, hey, look, when you bring your family, here is this Humboldt Promise that is sitting in place for your kiddos when they
Hmm.
get up to be college age. We're doing a lot of other things along that. Our additional daycare programming is important in that we have a really robust retirement matching program in our district, and so all of those, I think we have a great salary in our district, and so when we talk about what that looks like for recruitment, I feel like it is just like you talked about an arrow in your quiver,
Right.
one more piece to the puzzle of recruiting talented staff. One of the pieces we talk a lot about is just how unique Humboldt is as a community.
Hmm.
We hear a lot from young teachers coming out. I'm actually headed to Pitt State on Friday to visit with some of their young teachers, just as kind of a panel of administrators. And one of the things we hear a lot is, I want to go somewhere where there's things to do. I
Hmm.
want to go somewhere where there's entertainment. And Humboldt is a unique community because we have that. We have some things for people to do as far as entertainment wise. We have some really fun restaurants to
Yep.
to to go and be part of. And so I think all of that has to come together when we talk about how we recruit and retain
Mm.
teachers. It is the things we do as a school, but it's also the things we do as a community.
Yeah, real
Yeah.
multifaceted approach. When you think about the Humboldt Promise, I think there's a lot of work, and Helen was talking to me about this with educating the students and helping the students believe that part.
Mhm.
But just as recruitment is a community thing, there's also an educational part for parents and just the wider community of one, how impactful the Humboldt Promise is, but two, why it's so necessary for today's changing world, changing economy, changing job market. We don't really know what the jobs of the future are going to look like. And I'm wondering what you're hearing when you talk to parents, especially of that high school age, and they start talking about college or tech or those next steps. Um, Are those conversations changing because of the Humboldt Promise?
Well, what we used to hear, and so I had the unique opportunity when this was introduced at our board meeting to have a parent of a senior the year before sitting in our board meeting, and watching the look on that parent's face was
Uh,
absolutely amazing. And those kinds of things, I think,
yeah.
have been so impact. Like, that's what we initially heard. Like, we heard over and over again, the cost of education was a problem. It was a
Yeah.
barrier,
Yeah.
and now there are limits on how much a parent can borrow to help their student, how much a student can borrow at a time. And so for some of our kids, it wasn't just a matter of racking up debt. It truly was inaccessible.
Those are new requirements. You're right.
Yes.
I remember reading about those.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so it truly made certain college programming inaccessible for some kids. And so to me, now the conversations are more along the lines of, where are we going? What are we going to do next? We're starting to hear more of the technical questions versus how in the world am I going to pay for this? So far, my conversations with parents have really been along the lines of, I can't believe this is happening. This is a dream come true. I never thought I could do this. I was afraid my kid would never have this opportunity. And, we talk about that a lot for the kids, but, I'm a parent, and how powerful to sit and say, money's not going to hold my kid out of college. Even if I have, and in a lot of cases, our parents have worked so hard to make lives for their children better than their lives were, or better than what they've had. I think that's every parent's dream, is for their kids to have better than they have. And then here this gift is given of, hey, look, regardless of where you sit financially, your kid has a pathway to college. And I just think that's really powerful.
You touched a little bit on enrollment. I wanted to dive a little bit more into that. And so you were saying that you saw considerable growth in that 6th grade class, and then kind of in the kindergarten and 1st grade is
I would say those are where our largest
where your
areas
largest
of growth occurred. So that 6th grade class has been large for a while. We were able to add a section of that this year to be able to accept a few more students than what we had been in the past. We had to turn down some out of district students just because we didn't have space there.
right.
But we were able to accept some of that. Kindergarten and preschool were large. Would they have been large without? I don't know. It's the first time they had enrolled, but that's where we saw the most growth. If you take a look at communities across the state, like not even just in our area, across the state, any rural districts are losing vast amounts of students. Like we just had a meeting on it about declining enrollment and how that is impacting districts' budgets, districts' availability of services, just that declining enrollment piece. And we stayed pretty similar. Like we have about a 10 student up and down, and we have for years. But for us to be able to stay steady is pretty remarkable in a declining enrollment area. Like we're seeing that across the board. And so we were really excited that our numbers are there. We have the infrastructure in place. If that growth happens, our bond put us in a really good place to be able to grow if we need to. And we're excited about that possibility. We've seen some growth. Like we've had to add some elementary classrooms along the way, and we're excited about that. So I feel like we're in a good place as we grow. I feel like we're in a good place to be able to absorb that.
That falls in line with kind of what I've been reading. Just public schools, not even statewide, nationally.
Yeah.
This is a national issue of just declining enrollments in public schools. Just a little bit of that post-COVID distrust, I think, with traditional education and public education, and trying to do what we can to get kids back into public school. We know the benefits socially, academically, emotionally. And then when they go on and they're looking at post-secondary, all of the opportunities now that are afforded to them, with whether it's CTE or higher ed or your traditional college type of experiences. I wanted to touch too on the virtual program, because that's a significant enrollment chunk for you. So is that part growing, or how's that the virtual program kind of how's that going?
Yeah. So when we talk about declining enrollment in our buildings, a lot of what we're seeing is birth rate. So just the decline in an overall birth rate across the state and the nation
Mhm.
is so much lower. Our virtual program, post COVID, we found some families that a lot of our families said, "I don't ever want to do that again." Right?
Mm.
I don't ever want to go back to
Right.
that type of learning.
Zooming everything
Yes,
and
but
yeah.
some of our families said, "Hey, this really works for my family. We have a unique scenario where we need to travel, or we just want to travel, or we see a lot of different types of scenarios. Like we have students who are in the rodeo and they travel a lot,
Right.
and it does not fit well with a traditional schedule. And so we also have students who like they need to work during the day, and so they would prefer to do their
Mhm.
learning at night. Well, that doesn't
Mhm.
work with a traditional schedule. And so I think post COVID we saw a pretty large increase in our virtual program.
Mm.
um,
I was kind of expecting the opposite. Everybody
no,
says, "Yeah, I'm done. I want to get back into the
yeah,
classroom."
well, and some of them did. Like a good
Mhm.
chunk of all of our people said, "I want to go back to my building. I want to
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
back and sit in a classroom." And but some of our families found that to be a model that they really liked. And I think that's really as we are growing as educators is understanding the need for multiple models. Like
Right.
we need to be able to reach. We've been talking a long time about how every kid is different. Well, every family is different too, and every family has different needs. And so I think our virtual program has really addressed the fact that we need a different modality sometimes. And so we saw a pretty large increase right away. That has leveled out. We also have some pretty strong, our director does a great job of saying we want to make sure kids can be successful in this program. So there are some parameters that we look at. They have to apply and be accepted because they do need there does need to be some things in place for them to truly be
Be
successful,
successful.
and we
Yeah.
want them to be successful.
Yeah.
That's the idea. So I so numbers wise, we saw a pretty large increase. We've kind of leveled out at the 250 to 300 range of
Mhm.
students, and so that would mostly be high school students. We take adults as well. There is nothing like shaking the hand and turning the tassel of an adult who
Yeah.
didn't make it, and now all of a sudden they have a diploma in their hands, and that is just an amazing feeling.
It is, I imagine. And that's open. Is the virtual program bound by your traditional school district, or can anybody from Allen County or the state of Kansas apply, or how does that kind of work for who can apply for the virtual program?
So schools are governed typically by the state
Mhm.
and our district, of course. And so it is a district school, but it is still governed by the state of Kansas. So we can accept any student in the state of Kansas. It has to be that, like it can't be outside of the state
Can't
of
be somebody from
Kansas.
California or
No, it
Colorado.
has to be inside the state of Kansas. We run our own programs, so we do not use a third party. Some places use a third party where they can accept out of state people,
Mm.
but ours is very specific to Kansas students. But we do have students from all over the state. So we have students from Wichita, we have students from Kansas City, and in May when they come to graduate, if you were to walk the cars, you would see all kinds of
Different
license
license
plates from
plates.
all over Kansas, and it's exciting. But yes, we do have specific rules that we have to follow
Mhm.
because it is a Kansas public school. So we still have to follow all the rules that fall in there. But we can take students from, just like as a district, we could take students from anywhere
Right.
with open enrollment. And our virtual program operates the same way. It's simply with our brick and mortar classrooms are kind of stuck with wherever it's close enough
Yeah.
that people can get to
There's some
school every
logistics
day.
involved.
Yes.
Yeah.
And virtual doesn't have that same barrier. So
I want to shift gears a little bit because one of the things that really caught my eye at the start of this school year is Humboldt moved to drastically reduce or limit the use of cell phones among the student population. And I wanted to hear your thoughts on how it's going, what students and teachers and parents have been hearing, because looking statewide now, there's Senate Bill 302, which, if it passes, would pretty much ban cell phones during instructional time across the state.
Mhm.
And so you are already there. And I wonder what your thoughts are on this experiment so far. How's it going?
I think one of the things we did early on that was very helpful was we actually brought an entire team together to do a study of our community. The state did that at the state level, and so we essentially mimicked that with our own community. And so we had parents, we had teachers, we had an administrator that sat and came together and said, what would be our recommendations? They used the recommendations from the state. They talked to other districts, and then they came up with a recommendation that the board then acted on. And I think if we would have talked in the first month, like we had seen several violations in the first month, those have nearly completely dropped off. Kids are used to it now. Parents are a little more used to it now, and our teachers are very. They have found a significant difference in just not having that as a distraction. So,
tell me more. What are they seeing? What are they observing in their students and maybe in themselves?
I think one of the things that I have observed is our cafeteria is louder. Like the spaces are louder. Kids are talking to each other, and that was part of the goal. Part of our goal was to get kids back to having some social skills that don't involve a screen in front of them, and so that was important. That was important to all of our people. Our students have said several times they sure wish they could have it during lunch and passing periods. For us, it was kind of a thing where we didn't want to have we felt like it either needed to be out or not. It was
we're either doing this or we're
yeah,
not. Yeah.
It was too hard to figure out whether a kid had it out because they were in a passing period or whether they had just come from lunch. And now it's just, that's part of and we found other ways to communicate, we run a daycare, and some of our high school students work for us in that daycare, and our students have access to email. And so sometimes that's a good way to communicate where they aren't necessarily having to look at that in the middle of class, but they're catching that after school, and which is what we do as adults as well, right? We do the important things and then catch up with those things after the fact. And so we're seeing really good success with that.
So you're happy. I mean, this is positive. You're not,
yes,
oh my gosh, I wish we could go back. You're not hearing that from people.
From some, yes, from some of our kids, I'm sure they would rather go back. But
Right.
By and large, I think our kids have found it to be successful. I think and I think it is beneficial that there's not a lot of gray area. Like there isn't this gray area of, well, maybe you can have it out here and maybe you can have it out here. But I also know there are districts that have found real success with saying you can have it out at lunch. That's one of my concerns with the state getting involved with that, is that, we brought together an entire group of our community people.
You found the solution that worked for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I feel like each community deserves to get to have that. Like, that's why we have a school board. Our school board is there to create policy. And that's exactly what they did. And that's what it looks like when it's successful, is our school board says, hey, we bring together a group of people and we give a recommendation. And then that recommendation comes back to the board sets policy, and that's what our schools look like. When that comes from the state legislature, it looks a lot different, because not every community looks exactly the same. Not every community has exactly the same makeup. And so I really believe that is a decision that I was really glad our board made prior to there being a legislative decision. I really hope that they will consider leaving that in the hands of our board. So if our board ever says, hey, look, I think we need to make some adjustments, they're the ones boots on the ground, right? They're the ones in our communities hearing things and listening to people. And I really feel like that decision should get to set with our local boards.
No, I am super excited by the idea of less screen time for our young people. I mean, I am heartened by the idea of a cafeteria being louder.
Yeah.
I remember being on a school bus with a group of students a couple years ago. And when I was a kid on the school bus, it was loud. Kids were talking, kids were shrieking, they were screaming.
Mm-hmm.
And this time, as an adult, I get on the school bus and it's silent the whole way. And I thought, God, this is awful. Everybody's just in their own, they get their earbuds in, they're watching whatever on TikTok. And it just seemed to be that socialization, that building of friendships, and just being able to explore who you are outside of the digital space, I think is really, really important.
Well, and we had a unique scenario too. Our middle school has been that way for, I'm going to get the number wrong, for 2 or 3 years already prior to us adopting that. So our middle school kids were used to not having their phones during the day. So as those kids moved up into high school, the ones that were freshmen, they hadn't had it at all through their middle school years. And so, I think that piece also helped us make that transition, because we had already been there at our middle school. Yeah. Our middle school had done it years before. And then we just essentially added our 9-12 group.
It'll be interesting to see too, kind of what you're saying, where that manifests itself in academic gains, if you start to see, and I hear you convinced on the social side, but also just to see if those academic gains are kind of the icing on the cake as well. Not only are students enjoying school more and they're feeling like they're not constantly worried about being recorded doing something stupid, or the cyberbullying is such a concern for me when you talk about how kids view school now. I am so lucky. I think if I was in high school with, TikTok and Snapchat and everything, oh my gosh, just how many embarrassing things did I do in high school that I'm so glad aren't on video?
We're glad we didn't have to live our teenage years
on, oh my God,
on YouTube or Facebook. Yes.
So I just think just getting that out of there is a big plus. Okay, you mentioned running a daycare. And so I'm imagining you're talking about the community care center. So I have not been out there yet. I've driven by, but I haven't been in. So I'm curious, tell me about the community care center. What services are offered? How's it going? What's it looking like?
Yeah, so a few years ago, we kind of got word that some area places weren't going to take infants anymore. And I started freaking out about what in the world does that mean for our staff members who need to have care. And the growing place is an amazing facility. My kiddo grew up there, but also they can't shoulder the entire burden. And so really started looking at what that meant for our staff. And I got a little nervous. And so a grant was out there, an accelerator grant was out there. And once that happened, I thought, well, gosh, maybe we need to look into this. Well, what I didn't know was that grant was not just a daycare grant. Daycare was a piece of it, but a very small piece. It was really for a multifaceted, multi-services building, which is exactly what rural communities, if when I talk about what I really believe rural communities have to thrive and what rural schools have to have, it's about partnerships. It's about groups of people coming together to provide services we can't always get in rural communities. And so that's what that building is about. So it does house a daycare. So we have 24 daycare slots. We actually met with KDHE and their licensing people. And I said, tell me a little bit about this because I don't know anything about running daycares. And she said, she said, well, what do you want? I said, well, I need to be able to take staff kids. And she said, well, do you need infants? I said, well, I need whatever the staff has at the time. Like sometimes it's infants, sometimes it's toddlers. And so she helped us kind of build an idea of it's what's called a home-based program in a commercial setting, which is a really long title to say we have multi-ages in the classroom. So they can run from birth to age 10. And within that, the numbers are different based on how many infants you have, how many toddlers you have. Right. We are licensed up to 24 because we have 2 of those rooms, and each room is licensed up to 12. We can't always have 12 because sometimes we have infants, the number drops a little bit, like there's a ratio. But so that is a piece of it is our daycare with 24 slots.
Are you full? Have you got them all?
We are full. We have timing is a little different. Like, if you wanted to come in the morning, like just in the morning, I probably have slot, but nobody really needs care for like 3 hours just in the morning. But we also take kids from our preschool is, we have a lot of our kids who attend preschool one half of the day
either
or the
in the
other.
morning or the afternoon.
So we transport them back and forth. And so sometimes our kids cross in the middle. Lunchtime is an exciting time because they're all there. So I was there today during lunchtime and it's busy and
there's
fun.
a cafeteria there? They
eat in their rooms.
Okay.
So our cafeteria provides their food. So today they had chili, just like our kiddos had chili. They had chili and cinnamon rolls, and their cinnamon rolls looked really good.
I want to ask about, so the idea, the impetus there was my staff need childcare, which I think a lot of area employers would heartily endorse. So of those 24, are most of those spots filled by USD 258 employees, or are there community members as well, or how's that work?
So we actually have kind of a 3-pronged system. So the first prong is our staff. You work for us, you have first shot if I have an open slot. Okay. The second prong is the people who work in our facility but maybe aren't our employees. So we have mental health people who work within our buildings. We have lots of people employed in that particular facility. We have nurses and physician assistants and all sorts of, so people who work in our facilities but maybe aren't necessarily employed by us. We did that because we need all of those people. I need mental health people in our buildings. And that's a way for us as a district to help support those organizations that are partnering with us and support their people that are in our buildings. So that's our second group. And then our last group is community members.
Okay.
So I don't know exact numbers on that.
How
I would
many
say we're
of each?
probably 60% in the top two categories and 40, but that's a total guess.
Yeah.
I
No,
could
that's
be off.
interesting though to hear.
Mhm.
Okay, so you've got a daycare.
Mhm.
Then what else have you got in there?
So the second component was education.
Mhm.
So our virtual program is housed in that facility. We had
Now
been
completely independently there, or not independently, but entirely there.
entirely there. We had a downtown building, and it
I
was a
remember
great
that.
facility.
Yeah.
But we had desks sitting in the kitchen, and we had 2 or 3 people sitting in kind of back spaces because we were just so full. We grew and we needed more staff, and we didn't have the space. And so this allows them to have their own offices. It's a great space. We also partnered with Allen Community College. So they are our secondary education / workforce development piece, because workforce development was a component of that.
Okay.
And so like our idea is we want to be able to hold events where somebody walks in and says, I don't know what I want to do, but it's not what I'm doing right now.
Mhm.
And that we can point them. We say, do you have a high school diploma? Great. Come over here and let's talk to our virtual program. Do you want to do something that requires some sort of certification or additional coursework? And then we talk with
All
Alan.
those wraparound services to
Yes.
really 360 care, or Okay, and then there's another part.
Yep. So then
Ashley Clinic.
we also healthcare was also a
Healthcare, okay.
component. And healthcare included a lot of people went the mental health care route, which was important to us. We do have a couple of offices mental health care wise. Right now, Ashley Clinic is also a piece of that. I learned all kinds of things about lead-lined rooms, because for the first time in about 10 years, we have a X-ray room in that facility in Humboldt. So that was really exciting.
And then you can, so just like what you're saying, somebody comes in from the community and they want help with job training, or is that healthcare piece for USD 258 students, or is it for everybody, or how's that work?
It is their clinic. So they used to be located downtown. They were out of space. And so this gave them additional space and additional pieces. So it is truly our clinic.
That is
for the
interesting.
community. And
okay. So
for
anybody
us-
can go in there for a flu shot, a checkup.
Yeah, just like you would have at their downtown office.
Okay.
And for me, that's about when we have healthy families, our kids are more ready to learn. Like, we know learning doesn't happen in a vacuum ever. So we need kids to be healthy. We need kids to be in school. And when they can't be in school, if they're sick and not able to get to a doctor. And so this provides care in our community, and that was important.
So now I'm just imagining I'm a school nurse at the elementary, middle, or high school. Are you able, so for the Iola Elementary, CHCSEK has a nurse practitioner there. What does it look like for you guys? Are you referring now, somebody fell and they might have sprained their ankle, or, are you sending people to the Cubs Care Center or the Community Care Center?
So it would operate more as a clinic. Like we've been in contact about maybe providing some connection there where there maybe some services are provided in our schools, but it looks different than the CHC clinic does at Iola. It was really about us being able to make sure that we had the space and availability to continue the clinic piece of that. You would still have to have an appointment at the clinic, things like that. But we have appreciated the partnership that is there.
It's incredible.
It is. And
it's a beautiful building. I need to get in. I would drive by every once in a while and just see, how quickly it was built. Seems like all of a sudden it was just
there. So
risen.
It started when you had to send a picture. You had to send like a picture of what the building would look like. And originally it called for architect plans. Well, everybody said, well, hey, I can't pay an architect to do this without actually having the grant. And so they allowed us just to turn in what we would do. And so on a sheet of notebook paper, like white copy paper, I had this little drawing
That's really cool.
of what it looked like for what I would want this building to look like. And so then when we got approved, it was me handing this piece of copy paper to our architects and saying, well, here's my drawing. Now, can you make your drawing?
But that's cool to dream something into existence like that.
And we knew there was a time limit on it. So originally there was a very tight time limit on drawing down funds. We only had a year to do that. And so the building happened fast. We worked with a great construction company who understood our timeline and worked really hard. It rained and rained and rained and rained last year. And so we were about a month behind, but man, it moved and it happened fast.
I remember seeing it. Okay, so still on the building facilities, The $17.5 million bond issue, I think that was passed in 22.
Yes.
Is it done? Are you almost?
Yeah,
or is there still
yeah,
construction?
well, we're finishing up a few things here and there. I've decided that construction kind of, the last few things, but really we kind of have finished the last few pieces. Right now, it is making sure that the pieces we have are working like they're supposed to.
Okay.
We replaced a whole lot of HVAC units, and
Yeah.
HVAC is always a challenge.
Yeah.
I say that's a 4-letter word sometimes in schools because HVAC it's a challenge everywhere. You have a lot of things running to keep buildings warm and keep buildings cool. So,
And they're big spaces.
they are very
Gyms
big spaces.
are
Yes.
huge.
Yeah, and so our bond we are essentially finished with
Just
that.
that punch list of the
Yep,
last.
just that last few things, and it's been a really exciting piece. And I think about how that plays into the Humboldt Promise, and I think we added a couple of classrooms at our middle school, along with a new art space that we desperately needed, and we added classrooms at our elementary school. When we originally had the bond back pre-COVID, the intent was to add 2 classrooms, and we really felt like that wasn't maybe quite enough, and so we reworked that prior to us passing it, and we did 4 classrooms.
4 in the elementary school.
In the elementary school, and what
Wow.
a blessing that has been, because as we've had to add classes over the last couple of years, we
You
at
have
least
the
have space to put it.
You don't have
We
to
will
divide.
always use whatever space we have. There's always something in a space, but it has given us some spaces to say, hey, this has to be a classroom, and this one has to be a classroom, and there is probably space for maybe 2 more additional classrooms at some point in time, but then that site is
maxed
full. Yeah, we moved our playground as part of that, and we have a beautiful new playground. That's been a exciting piece of that. But the bond itself, I said it was really, there were a lot of things you could see. Like you got to see the additional piece, you got to see the new high school office area that has a secure entrance,
With the
a secure
mechanicals and the HVAC, all that is so important.
roofs. I mean, you don't see them until they're broke, right?
Yeah.
And then everybody notices that the roof is leaking. And so those kinds of things were part of the bond, and such a supportive community. I mean, Humboldt is incredibly supportive of our schools, and to be able to come in as a first-year superintendent, I heard somebody say that they didn't think they'd ever heard a first-year superintendent passing a bond, and I said, well, that's because I didn't pass the bond. Like that had nothing, like it had to do with the community did this. The community said this is what they wanted, and here we go. And so that has been a huge piece of the puzzle, is just the support that the community had for, hey, look, we know we want to have our buildings to have safe and secure safety and security. We want to have secure entrances in our facilities, and it did that. We know there's upkeep that has to happen to those buildings, and so we did that. We know we don't want our kids walking outside in the middle of a storm to get to a storm shelter. We took care of that. So the support of the community is just outstanding.
That kind of leads into a question I had, just kind of about what's next. So you've had all of these really incredible projects, the community care center, the bond issue, the Humboldt Promise. I'm wondering, are you and your board kind of waiting for the dust to settle a little bit? Are there other things that you're thinking, you know what, this is X, Y, and Z that we're, I was just kind of curious on a temperature check for your board, and what, the next, I'm not sure of a timeline, but, just kind of what your next blank is. Are there things on your horizon that you're eager to tackle, or thinking, you know what, eventually we're going to have to look at this or study it a little bit more?
I think, there was a point in time in the middle of last year when I said, when we're done building this, I'm not building anything else. We're done building.
I can understand that.
And now, of course, he will say, hey, what about? And I'm like, well, maybe. But no, I really think I don't know that you can live in Humboldt and not always be thinking about what's next. Right? Yeah. And our school board is incredibly progressive. Like they want, but it's always about what's good for kids. So like when we talked about the community care center, it's because we need teachers to have childcare so they can come and take care of other people's kids and do what's right for the kids in their classrooms. And we need healthcare because that's what's right for kids. Having access to quality healthcare is what's right for families and for kids. And so I don't know what's on the horizon other than, we are continuing to find ways to improve things for kids. We're really focused on providing quality instruction. Like that's a big piece for us. Um,
Being open, though, I think what I hear
yeah,
you saying is that this board is open to those possibilities. If it's going to help kids, if it's going to
yeah,
help our district, there's an eagerness to jump on board there, and that's exciting. It
yeah, and
seems contagious, right?
it is, and I don't think it's, hey, let's jump on the next bandwagon. It
Mm.
isn't in that scenario. It's that, you know, there are places where if you'd have told me some of the things that we've done along the way, that we've done along the way, if we'd have been talking about a care center like what we have now, I'd have kind of laughed because like that was just so far out of the realm. And so people have brought me a few things and I've stopped laughing
Mm.
because in
That's
Humboldt,
interesting.
there's always the chance, there's always the chance this might actually come. But it's always going to be about, is this good for our kids? Is this good for our families? Is it good for our district?
Yeah.
So,
Well, thank you very much for your time,
absolutely.
and thank you for the work that you're doing with our kids. It's very exciting to hear all this progress, and also, as you're saying, to think about the future with um, real energy and ambition and enthusiasm. I think that's something we can all take with us wherever we are.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you very much.